Since the earliest days of humanity, keeping fire was a sacred ritual tied to survival. A tribe that lost its flame had to borrow it from another, a true tragedy of civilization. Yet in the 19th century, a laboratory accident in Vienna transformed that sacred power into a 5-cent commodity. For the first time, people could buy fire inside a paper box. The story of matches is not merely the history of an invention, it is the history of how energy was standardized and democratized. From a divine symbol to an industrial product, fire passed through a brutal process of domestication paid for with blood, bone, and hard lessons about industrial ethics. This is the story of a modern Prometheus, chained not by gods, but by systems of production. In the mid-19th century, Europe fell into a white match fever. Factories in London, Vienna, and Stockholm produced millions of sticks each day using white phosphorus P4 as an ignition agent, a chemical brilliant and reactive, yet terrifyingly toxic. Workers who inhaled phosphorus dust for only weeks began to lose teeth, suffer jawbone necrosis, and endure permanent facial disfigurement. The disease became known by a cold, clinical name Fossy Jaw. The crisis was not only medical, it was moral.
Indeed.
Companies understood the danger but continued production for profit. In 1888, young women working in British match factories launched a strike, one of the earliest labor uprisings for industrial safety. From their ashes, the concept of workplace protection slowly emerged. And society began to realize that every burning match carried the shadow of a human life once sacrificed. In 1844, two Swedish brothers, Johan Edvard and Carl Lundström, sparked a quiet revolution. They did not invent fire, they invented separation. Before their innovation, white phosphorus sat directly on the match head, ready to ignite at the slightest friction. The Lundströms realized that instead of softening the chemistry, they could divide it. The oxidizer would remain on the match head, while the ignition compound would move to the striking surface. When these two parts met only at the moment of use, the reaction became perfectly controlled. Thus, the safety match was born. This was more than a technical upgrade, it was an ethical manifesto. Safety does not come from materials alone, but from system design. Their invention spread rapidly across Europe and became known as the Swedish miracle. For the first time, people could carry fire in their pockets without fear of burning themselves. As matches became a global commodity, something unexpected happened. Forests themselves had to obey industrial standards. Matchwood could not be random. It had to be flexible enough not to snap during striking, porous enough to absorb chemicals, yet not so dense that it burned too slowly. After countless experiments, the industry chose Aspen populus tremula, a tree common across northern Europe. Soon, entire aspen forests were cultivated like energy mines of the modern world. Each year, billions of matchsticks were exported alongside hundreds of thousands of tons of timber, transforming organic matter into a micro-scale energy infrastructure. Standardizing matches led to the standardization of forests, tools, and logistics, a model later echoed by the steel and electrical industries. A tiny product became an early step toward the globalization of energy. The 20th century introduced butane lighters, plasma ignition, and automated fire-starting technologies. Yet, matches never disappeared. The reason is simple. A match cannot fail in the way complex machines do. It has no pressurized gas, no delicate parts, no battery to recharge. A wet matchbox can be dried and still function years later. In military contexts, matches remain a final fail-safe device, reliable when everything else fails. In disaster zones where electricity and fuel lines collapse, they serve as the last bridge between humanity and primitive energy. Many call matches outdated, but in truth, they represent a benchmark of reliability. In a world where technology grows more sophisticated and more fragile, the match reminds us that perfection sometimes lies in simplicity, so complete it cannot break. The history of the match mirrors the history of civilization itself, from instinct to engineering, from survival to ethics. For thousands of years, fire symbolized power, the privilege of those who could control energy. When matches emerged, that power was redistributed to individuals. Anyone could ignite a flame, cook, warm themselves, or illuminate a private space, a quiet democratization of energy. Yet the match also carries a warning about responsibility. Every technology, no matter how small, has a human, environmental, and ethical cost. In an era of nuclear reactions and artificial intelligence, we can still look at a single matchstick to understand the fundamental principle of progress. Power lies not in creating energy, but in controlling it. A match burning in your hand is the flame of Prometheus, no longer a divine punishment, but a force humanity has learned to hold without fear of being consumed.